This is our first video about processing language for the Computer Science 111 course at Stetson University. First, I want to show you the website for processing.org. This is very useful to you. It's basically a reference, kind of in lieu of a textbook, for all the functions and features of the processing language. The front page here shows whatever recent news and download links, but I'll point out two things that are important. First is the reference, which is going to be a exhaustive list of all the functions that you can use. So we see shape functions, curve functions, color functions, and so forth. But also the tutorials where you can see a lot of the different topics that we're going to cover in this class, and some topics we're not going to cover, and we'll cover topics that aren't here as well. First thing I want to do is talk about the coordinate system. Since we're going to be drawing things, you're going to need to know what's up and down and left and right, and it's different than graph paper. Their tutorial coordinate system and shapes here is the best explanation. The first picture is not the true picture for processing. This is just saying what a coordinate system is, X and Y coordinates. Really what we care about is this picture on the right here. On the computer, or computer graphics generally, the 0, 0 is at the top left. So if you want something to, say, move down the screen, you'll have to increase the Y value. X works the normal way, left to right, increases to the right, but Y increases down, so things fall if their Y value increases. Now that we have that, let's just draw some shapes. We have rectangles. You're going to give X, Y, and then width and height. So let's say it's at X 50, Y 50, width 75, height 25. So it should be a kind of flat line down rectangle. If you click play or run, you'll see it makes a little window for you. That gray area in the middle is the part that it's drawing on, and we see part of a rectangle. Now it just decided what the size of the window was going to be. It's probably 100 by 100. That's not really big enough for this purpose. So let's change that. And you have to change it first because whatever line of code comes first happens first. So there's no point in changing the size after you've already drawn the rectangle because it won't have any effect. Let's make the window 800 by 600. Now we'll see the rectangle, and it should be on the left top. There it is. Because it's 50 down, that's the Y, 50 over, that's the X. It's 75 pixels across and 25 pixels tall. Now it's kind of interesting. You don't specify in these four numbers which is which. The width and height the X and Y come first and width and height come second, just by virtue of the order. So there's no way to put the 75, 25 first and get the same rectangle. The order matters. These are called the arguments to the function. This is called the function. Functions that are built into processing, like on this list of existing functions in the references, those should be colored blue if you type them correctly. So we just typed the rectangle command, and that's why it's blue. And the size command is on that list also. We can also draw an ellipse, otherwise also known as a circle if you make it the same width and height. Let's put it over down a little bit, and we'll make it 50-50. So that should be a circle because, again, the last two are width and height. An ellipse that's the same width and height will be a circle. And then let's make a oval, make it wider than it is tall. And so you have that. Not very attractive, obviously, but there's a lot more that you can do with these primitive shapes. You also have lines. Now, lines are slightly different. You don't give a width and a height because it's a line. So let's look at the language reference again. Line takes four numbers like the others do, but you need to scroll down and see, okay, what are the numbers? It could take 6 numbers too. That's if you're doing 3D. So in this case, with the 4 numbers, it's X, Y, X, Y. So basically start and end positions of the line. Let's do that. Make a line on the middle of the screen. So that should be about, we'll say 350X and 250Y. And then let's extend it for a bit, 450X, 350Y. Be kind of diagonal line. There it is. Now there's something that you can affect on these shapes and lines. The outline here is called a stroke. So let's change that stroke. Stroke width, we'll say 5. It's going to be much, did I spell that wrong? Let's check the reference. Go back, anything called stroke, let's do a search, stroke, weight, it's not width, weight, stroke weight. Okay, and you'll see it has no effect actually. That's because, again, order matters. This line of code, line 5, says, okay, anything after this, stroke weight's 5. But I've already drawn the shapes, so it's pointless. Let's move it up. Maybe before, we'll do the rectangle normal, and then we'll change the stroke weight. So the ones that come after the ellipse and the line have different stroke weights. Now, last thing, color. Color is interesting because there's actually 2 common formats for specifying colors in computer graphics. You have RGB and you have hue, saturation, brightness. There's a color selector, which is convenient in processing. If you go to the menu, tools, color selector, you can make your color. And you'll notice you've got HSB and you've got RGB. And you can use either when you specify the color in your code. You've also got this, which is kind of like HTML syntax. It's actually RGB. The first pair of numbers is the red. This pair is the G, and this pair is the B, B. And they're specified in hexadecimal notation. So it takes 2 numbers to specify a number between 0 and 255. These 2 numbers, both digits can range from 0 to 9, and then A, B, C, D, E, F. So that gives you 16 different values you can put in each position, 0 through 9, A through F. And when you have 16 possibilities and 16 possibilities, you get 256 possibilities for a pair. So we can use this format. So that's kind of a green. Let's go over here and change the fill of the ellipse. The lines don't have fills, so even though I'm doing it before the line, you won't see anything on the line. We're just going to paste that number, hexadecimal notation or HTML notation. So there's your color. We can do another color for the rectangle, and I go back to this selector. I'm going to use RGB format. So let's go over to this color. R is going to be 160, 13, 74. All right, so 2 different ways of specifying the fill. You can use HTML or hexadecimal notation with a hash sign, or you can use RGB, 3 different numbers. That's the fill. You can also change the stroke if you do stroke color, is it? Let's check. Stroke, stroke. That's just called stroke. You put a color inside the parentheses and you get a different color of stroke. Or you can turn the stroke off, by the way, with no stroke. There's no arguments. It's just no more stroke. Anyway, that's RGB colors, and you can use this color picker. Now it's also giving you HSB values. H is actually a degree from 0 to 360, like a circle. So it wraps back around. You see actually this vertical thing is kind of the hue. You see at the top it's red and at the bottom it's red because it actually wraps back around. S is saturation, is percent, which is how strong of a color is it. So if I go left to right, you see saturation is changing. With greater saturation, you get more of the color, and less, you're eventually going to get gray. B is brightness, that's the vertical. How bright of a color is it? If you go down the bottom, doesn't matter how much saturation you have or what hue you have, it's going to be black. And if you go all the way to the top, you're going to get the brightest form of that color. If you go all the way to the top left, no matter what your hue is, if you have no saturation and maximum brightness, you're called white. Right? So there's various ways to look at this. The whole bottom is going to be black because there's no brightness. The left side, and the whole left side here is going to be gray because there's no saturation. And when you're in the right side, anywhere, what color that is depends on the hue. So the hue is changing as I change this vertical bar here. Now you can't just put hue saturation value in your fill because that's going to look like RGB. You have to change the color mode first. So let's go back over here and say color mode. Color color mode, and HSB here is how we're going to use this. HSB, let's say the max is 360 for the, oh no, that's going to be for all of the digits. We're going to want 360, 100, 100 to match what this picker is giving us, because the H goes up to 360, as you see here, but the S and B go up to 100. So that's how we're going to specify this. So now 160, 1374 in HSB is something completely different. Let's type it in. That's that light green thing. And then this, if I copy that and paste it here, that's specifying RGB. So we'll see if that changes. I'm not sure if color mode changes that. Right, so that fill for the rectangle is using HSB, but the HTML hexadecimal notation for the other fill ignores HSB. So in the case when you're specifying a fill or stroke with 3 numbers, you got to know if you're in HSB mode or not. If you're specifying with HTML format, hexadecimal format, it doesn't matter. It's always RGB. Finally, you see here there's a gray background. You can affect the background too. And let's just put it here, background. I'm going to give 3 numbers, so I'm in HSB mode. Let's pick a color here. That's fine. 348, 90, 62. But we have no more picture. That's because the background command you can actually think of as filling the entire screen with the color. So if you do it last, it's going to cover up all of your other shapes. So you probably want to do it first, because it's not exactly saying the background will be the following. It's saying fill the whole screen with a color. So it really depends on when that happens. Now it happened first. Also, the color changed. Why? Because we put it before the change to HSB. By default, you're in RGB mode. So just putting it before or after this color mode command changes what that background color is going to be. And also notice it's under the shapes. So normally you want to do the background first before you do shapes. And that pretty much covers everything that we need to cover here. Next topic will be animation.